Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy late April Friday. Welcome to Money Talks, our monthly webinar for WASPO. Good to see everybody again. Andy, Brian, how you guys doing?
Doing great. It's getting warm out. We like it.
Not raining, so that's good.
Well, it's funny you say that. Well, first of all, let me comment. This is one of our best cartoons that we've had on Money Talks, I think. It's our little tribute to the NFL draft. Of course, the Packers didn't have anything going on last night, but um, that's actually a picture of Caleb Williams right there. Anyway. So I wanted not that I'm want to be a downer here, but I want to talk about we had just wicked storms roll through the state here, as everyone knows, over the last 2 weeks. And I want to share my hard lesson learned from a million years ago. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. For all of you, who are responsible for school facilities, if you were in the path of any of those storms, and there were some pretty violent hailstorms in particular, um, well, what happened to me was we didn't inspect the roofs, and it was a fall storm. And then in the spring, we had leaks, and we called the roofing contractor, and he's like, "This roof got nailed, by hail. When did that happen?" We were like, "Must have happened last fall." And so by the time we tried to report it, the insurance company was like, "Come on, you're trying to put in a claim for a storm that happened 6 months ago." So it's still early enough that you've got to take time to get your facility director up on the roof or call your roofing expert or whatever if you were in the path of any of those big hailstorms. And man, the hail was wicked in Madison. It was it was the size of canned hams, I think is what I was measuring. So yeah, it was like duck and run. I was tired of saying golf ball. I figured, it's a little bigger than a golf ball. So I don't, do you guys have any damage, flooding, anything?
It went north of us, so we were all good. But I was just going to add, if you have solar panels, that's the
Oh,
thing that got hit quite a bit. So
yeah. I, I I was driving home Friday and the storms were coming, rolling, west to east through the Madison area. And I was stopped on Stoughton Road, and there's this huge car dealership there. And I thought I wouldn't want to be the owner of that car dealership because he's got no defense, right? Anyway, go make sure you check your school facilities, okay?
Yeah,
Um,
especially after it rains a lot. We
yeah.
we saw in our camp after it rained 6.5 inches up by us.
Hmm.
We didn't get the hail, um, but we noticed a puddle of water in one of our entryways, and then we went into the gym, and there was water on the wood floor, which was great. We cleaned it all up, and then so a day later there was a puddle that showed up again from the wood excreting the water out. So
There's
floors
always this
often.
yeah, it's always this temptation to think, well, we survived, but you really got to go look for the damage, I guess is the point. So okay, so a
And Mike,
reminder, there's a chat going on here. The chat usually has better information and lots of great sharing about what's going on around the state. Please put your comments in the chat. And all those who use the chat to say snarky things about your three co-hosts here, um, try to, observe some rules of decorum for a change before we move on. Anything else, Andy, Brian, before we start to dive in?
now there seems to be a debate whether there's echo. So I don't know if there's one of us that's echoing. Let us know that.
let's say too, Mike, if there's floodwater and stuff, you got to take care of that, kind of quickly. There's a lot of bad stuff in floodwater, so it's not something you want to mess around with. All that. And then I like Becky's comment because, we're getting to that time of the year too. Do you turn on the air conditioning or not when it, becomes 80 degrees outside and then everyone's too hot, then the next day they're too cold and great times.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, good morning, Becky. Um, okay, so check for storm damage. What else did I want to comment on? Just a couple observations from the news. So most of my, my news zone, I mean, it's sort of statewide, but I haven't like this the teacher layoffs due to budget in K-12 in in especially in areas that previously did not we were kind of lucky to get out of that problem. I mean, like Western Waukesha County, your Kettle Moraines, Oconomowocs, Pewaukees, Arrowheads, etc. There's a lot of layoffs. And so just two thoughts about that. One is if you lay off a teacher, um, I don't know where that person's going to find a job. It's pretty tough out there. So I think that's part of what weighs on people is just this responsibility that it's kind of an economic death penalty if you lay somebody off right now. Um, and in some cases, you simply have to do it. But oof, tough business. Um, and then some of the controversies around my area have not been about layoffs, but about who was laid off. Because most of us have gotten away from language that simply says least seniors the first to go. So when management has more discretion to pick who gets laid off, then the accusations of targeting surface pretty quickly, or ageism, you're getting rid of the expensive people, a lot of controversies around who. And yeah, I mean, if we had a decent funding formula, we wouldn't be in these discussions, but it's pretty nasty stuff. So I'm sure all of you, or many of you, have sat through some very tough meetings around that. So um, and we're feeling for you. And then yeah, I think that's about it. I think we can dive in. But don't you love the cartoon? It's my favorite cartoon that we've done in a long time.
Great
Okay,
job drawing that, Mike.
I drew. That's right. That's right. I drew that by hand at like midnight last night. Um, okay, so this is our talented team, although we consider this to be kind of a group forum because of all the comments in the chat. So please feel free to participate. And we're going to talk about state budget surplus here. I want to just remind everybody that we try to be nonpartisan about this. We have rude things to say about the Democrats and the Republicans. So that's our version of being nonpartisan. Here's our topic train for today: state budget surplus and what's happening, referendum results. We're going to talk about butternut. They won by a vote. Way to go, butternut. And Brian, you've got some thoughts around title funding and purchasing cutoff, and maybe some advice around how to avoid audit delays. Okay? What do you think?
On it.
I move to approve the agenda. All right, here we go. So let's talk state budget surplus negotiations. How long has this been going on? And I love Conan. Every 2 weeks, it seems, there's this little energy bubble of rumor. Oh, there's going to be a deal. There's going to be a deal, and then that little bubble just bursts, right? And so, I mean, obviously, we're waiting, and we'll talk about, sort of what's at stake here. But I really want to talk about what it means at the school district level. So here's the background slide. I'll be quick. $2.5 billion surplus is sitting in the coffers at the state. Opportunity to fix the special ed reimbursement immediate problem, which was that 42% did not turn out to be 42, and 45 will not turn out to be 45. Or even go beyond that, up to the 50% or 60% that we've always lobbied for. So that's our immediate interest. Governor proposed putting $200 million in to the special ed reimbursement bucket. I forget where that gets us, but obviously more than we are at today. But then there's the trade-off. What are you going to do around tax rebates or school levy tax credits? It seems like more equalization aid seems to be the kind of the political football, maybe the key to the deal. So those are the variables, and how it gets worked out, we don't know. the incentives are kind of weird. You might have the GOP side saying they really want to push to get this deal done because they kind of want to drain the state budget coffers before they potentially lose control of the legislature. You have Democrats who normally might be more pro-spending are saying, well, maybe we might want to just not do that yet and not inherit a budget that's, barren going forward. So all the incentives are kind of moving and shifting all over the place. But so be it. I wanted to ask you guys, what is your position now? I assume you sort of factored in the fact that we're going to be down in well, let me back up. DPI is paying 35% right now. What's the story on the last minute adjustment? And will there be one? And is it really going to reach up to 38 as we've been hearing?
I think Pete's done some calculations, and I think the latest numbers that he had was somewhere in that 38% range. So that's kind of what I'm banking on at this point in time.
And that would be correct. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, and the weeks go by. I mean, I guess I'm not holding out hope that they're going to get to 42% for this year. I know that the superintendents were told yesterday by Dee that she was hearing 50% for next year, but it's not going to be some sufficient. It'd be some certain. So I'm assuming that they're targeting 50%, so then we hit the 45%.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's really difficult to forecast that. I wouldn't take anything to the board that, it's going to be 45% or anything like that.
Yeah. So, it's awfully late in the year, for 25, 26 to do anything meaningful. Yeah. So what are you budgeting right now when you're looking at 26, 27? What number did you put in?
Trying to remember, but I think I'm right around 38%. No, less than that, 35%, I think, something a little bit less.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that I had a cushion. I had a cushion last year of 2%. That wasn't enough. So taking it up a little bit more, I think.
And I have 39%. I guess I wasn't try to hit it as closely as possible, but I don't think we're going to get up to 40%.
Yeah. I was wondering about the politics of this. If you've got a really tight budget and you're making tough decisions and this big news story comes out, let's say a week or two from now, it says, oh, fantastic news. We've got 50% on special ed reimbursement starting next year. What does that look like in your district? I assume the first thing that's going to happen is your superintendent's going to ask you, how much money does that get us? And then how much does that free up? And I was wondering about those people who were laid off, reading that headline, thinking, well, maybe my job will get restored. How do you approach something like this?
I think if we were to hear that, you're going to have to, again, discount at this point in time and just count on that at this point, right? And then, if it gets better as the story kind of goes on and we get into the fall, then I think you can always reestablish more things, but I think you want to be conservative. It's always better to be on that side of the equation than on the other.
Yeah.
For us, we'd maintain status quo. I mean, we just passed a referendum that kind of said we would remain status quo, so we don't want to be adding on a whole bunch of staff, even if we would get more funding. We just put away the funding in our fund balance for 46 for future needs.
Yeah.
The other thing is, we're developing lists, like things that are not personnel related at this point that are, we can implement fairly quickly if we get more money down the road. So I think status quo is a good thing to start with, right? And then if it gets better, then you can go from there.
Yeah. Okay. I always felt it was, it was a little distracting at the end of the budget process when this new revenue source gets announced. This is again, this is if it were to happen. And for example, like in Madison, you had the Madison teachers, MTI Inc. They were on the news. They were all over it. They were running their own calculations. And they'd come to me and they'd say, we know you've got an extra, whatever, 50 million, 75 million. And here's our plan for you as to how to spend it. And it's like, okay, slow down. So I just want to make sure that if that we talk about this in the sense of just maybe doing some contingency planning, some communication planning with your superintendent and superintendent to board, so you don't get caught, with this, this idea that you're going to be able to restore everything and fix everything. It just doesn't work that way anymore. Anything else on this state budget surplus?
I'd just like to say that, we're thankful that they didn't settle it before the election, because for those that had referendums, that might have created a lot of issues for the operational, because now the state gave you a whole bunch of extra money. Why do you need the referendum dollars? But this isn't closing those, structural deficits.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say is
Don't give me any ideas, Brian. Go ahead, Andy.
the only other thing I would say is that it'll be interesting to see whether the money goes into school levy credits or state equalization aid. That there are different impacts there to different people.
Right.
So that'll be kind of an interesting thing to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But Andy, if it goes to general aid, then it's all spendable, right?
No. Stop it.
Sure, no problem, Brian.
If we had a penalty box, during money talks, you would be in for a 5-minute major just for putting that out there. Oh my
It's not
God.
spendable. It's not spendable, but politicians on both sides love to say that equalization aid is spendable and we have more money. Even our advocacy groups do the same thing.
They've both done it. Yes, historic investment in public schools, I think, was the classic headline. Yeah, I think everything that I hear is that the advocacy we've done around the the stinginess of the special ed reimbursement has actually penetrated the thick skulls of our lawmakers. I think they finally get it. And I think they're hoping to do something about it, mostly because I think they're starting to get a little embarrassed about it. And there's a lawsuit hanging over their head around the constitutionality of our funding system. So they've got some reasons to act. But it's like, what's the trade-off? Improve special ed funding, improve school funding, but then what are you going to give the other side of the deal, right? With the debit and the credit. And it might be tax rebates, it might be levy credits, who knows? Some of the dome, Capitol Dome watchers are worried that it's going to be like an uneven deal. Like, we'll give you 200 million on special ed, but we're going to want 1.2 billion on tax relief, and then we're going to kind of jazz up the budget going forward, right? So hopefully we're not going to trade we get an apple and give away an apple orchard in some kind of unbalanced deal. We'll see. So stay tuned. Anything else on surplus? The only thing I can say about this is that it's better than a deficit.
Yeah.
Right. And depending on the national economy and international stuff, it's amazing how quickly this can all turn, right? The economy and then the tax receipts, and you just never know. Okay, let's talk April referendum results. And I think overall, a couple of opening comments, I'll turn it over to you guys. Yeah, we shouldn't have to be doing this every year, or maybe sometimes twice a year. Yeah, it's kind of an indication that the system's not, really working the way it's supposed to. And I thought going into this April 7 that the conditions, like the mood of the voters, whatever you want to call that, was going to be pretty hostile because of all the rancor over property tax increases. It's kind of a sour mood. But overall, I felt bad for the 40% of these that didn't pass. I was delighted for the 60% that did. What were the results in your areas? Andy, you're in Dane County. Brian, you're up in Green Bay area.
I think mostly positive. I know a couple that lost, but you know, like you said, the property tax hit is starting to have an impact, starting to being talked about with school board members for elections and those types of things. So it's more on people's minds than it has been.
Wow. I didn't, I
Yeah,
didn't, I didn't
I
think
think we saw more of that too in our area, that it was more about the tax rates, and the no groups were strictly about the taxes. I don't know. It just seems like in this country, people are tired of paying taxes, but I don't, if we don't pay taxes, there'll be no services. Um,
yeah. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. Um, so in light of that, and usually the spring numbers are much smaller than the fall numbers, right? And there will be a big election, this general election this fall. That's it's a governor's race, right?
Yep.
Among other things. So there'll be a lot of these coming up. There were 75 questions, 46 approved, 26 rejected. It was kind of a hodgepodge of recurring and non-recurring, mostly non-recurring, and then capital. So Andy and I were talking about this before we started, that often the media will lump all that together and say there's $1 billion of $1 billion worth of items on the agenda on the ballot this spring. And I really don't like that statistic, because I was asking, how do you calculate the dollar value of a recurring referendum? How many years do you assume? 250? I don't know. Right. So
400.
before, well, that would be outrageous. We could,
Only 399.
so the number itself is obviously a made up number, right? And then you're mixing, and when they do report the non-recurring, I think they report all the years to, lumped together. So it's kind of a really inflated number. You look at it and you think, oh my God, 1 billion. But I don't know that it's really all that helpful or accurate. So, and then of course you're tossing in the debt capital, plus operating is also kind of weird. The spring approval rates were pretty similar to the parallel, which would have been spring of 24, which is, amazing under these conditions. Really tight races. Fewer than this number, fewer than that number. How about Butternut? Got to give a shout out to Butternut School District. We won by 1 vote. So if Butternut is up around Ashland County, if I remember this right, I think there's about 200 students in the Butternut School District. So if you're on the chat and you are from Butternut, this is your chance to shine. Go ahead and throw a brag out there on the chat. But yeah, Butternut. Okay, so do you like the pun? Butternut rolls with the one vote margin. Okay, this is the kind of comedy writing you can expect here on Money Talks. Never mind. So anyway, they won by a vote, which is amazing, right? Don't you love it? I was thinking of, there was probably like this one couple that was like, I'm gonna go vote no. And then they decided not to go, so it won. Or somebody who got home from work at like 10 minutes to 8 that night, and their spouse was like, you get back out there and vote. 1 vote. And look at how many of these. I mean, 4 that lost by fewer than 24 votes. That's just heartbreaking. These are all really, really tight, locally decided. Nakusa won. They did a great job as well. So
The chat, we got Shell Lake passing by 2 as well.
yes, well, they had double the margin of Butternut, so they know how to get it done. We should put Shell Lake out on the statewide PD circuit. They can start doing their "How We Did It" story. So I mean, it's got to be kind of thrilling to win one of those by a vote or two, right? It's got to be. That must be one heck of an election night party at some local supper club in those communities. But I'm assuming a lot of these that didn't win will come back in November. What do you think?
I would think so. Mike, we found a lot of success in kind of having the same messaging with other referendums that were in our area.
Oh,
Like Fond du Lac and Appleton were the big ones. So when our newspaper would do the story, they'd just kind of clump all three of them together, and we were all saying the same, that revenue has been keeping up with CPI, and for the community, there wasn't really any discussion on like, so what are you going to use the $6 million for? Like, are you sure you have to pay that much, or can't you just lower your insurance costs? Like they just understood that we were just underfunded, and that was super helpful. It was a weird kind of experience.
I think we should train everybody that if you say 325, you have to say it. And that's not even a CPI increase, right? We need to keep pounding that.
Yeah, and we used Ann's graph a lot to show the difference there, and usually no one's asking to get up to that number because it'd be a really large number for most districts. Um,
it would be. That's fascinating. I've not heard that expressed before, Brian, the idea of sort of a coordinated or semi-coordinated regional message. Is this something that gets talked about at Wasco regionals or at the superintendent PAC meetings?
Yeah, the Masbo group actually had a shared file that we were sharing messages with and stuff so that we could kind of make sure that we were in line a little bit.
I think up here the superintendents kind of talked about it a little bit, and it just made things easier.
That's
And
great.
then it just isn't, well, Menashe's asking for this, and it's Menashe, Fond du Lac, and Appleton are all going for the same thing, and unfortunately, Fond du Lac didn't pass theirs, but Appleton passed theirs.
Wow. This is counter to my previous thinking on this. When I was in Oconomowoc, we used to always say, we're asking for a lot less than those spendthrifts over at Arrowhead. So this is a much more positive message, Brian. I think this is really encouraging.
I mean, we did say, like Appleton's asking for a ton of money,
You
and we're
did.
not asking for as much. So, just kidding, Allie.
It could be worse. You could live in Appleton. If Holly Burke could balance a budget better, we wouldn't be having this problem, right? Oh gosh. Well, again, there's a reason these are called neverendums because you're going to have to go back if you didn't pass it, and I also feel like if you're going to have to make major cuts or even talk about some kind of a consolidation thing, I think you really have to push the voters hard. And if they say no and say no loud and repeatedly, okay, then you've got your orders, right? And so I think for that reason alone, it's worth going back and and really knowing the mind of your local voters.
And it's
So
helpful too I mean, it was helpful for us to survey. I know usually surveying the community is usually done on like a capital referendum, but
yeah,
it's helpful for operational too. And when we found out, we laid out three different amounts, and we were originally the lowest amount was going to be 7 million, and the margin was really tight at 7 million, and a lot more people said they would support something less. They didn't say what less was, so we just interpreted less as 6 million. So we knew that we'd be close. So it was just helpful, instead of going in blind.
right. Use a third party for your polling.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I highly recommend a third party. In the really old days, the district used to do it itself and include things like add your comments where people could write a narrative. Well, anything that gets sent to the school district is open public record. So the newspapers could just request it and then they would just write every rotten things that was said about the school district ended up in the news story. Now, if the polling is done by a third party, it's not subject to the same kind of open records and you just have more control over your messaging. So, um, school perceptions is very big in that market, if I remember right. No, they're not a sponsor. We don't have any sponsors. No one wants to sponsor Money Talks because we want to be independent and say mean things about everybody. Okay, so the Capitol had a nice, Capitol referendum did really well. Um, I was sorry to see Whitefish Bay had a really big one, and that did not pass. So I'm hoping they can kind of reorganize and come back. Um, and then the recurring, there were six of them, but in five passed. I think it's because the districts that have confidence that they're going to win are more inclined to say, and we're going to win even if we do recurring. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the sample is a little skewed that way. And then the non-recurring, which are obviously, as you can see just by the numbers, way more prevalent these days, um, had a slightly better than 50% passage rate. I love and I hate the non-recurring at the same time. It solves the immediate problem, but boy, the clock starts ticking immediately, right? And when this money's going to expire, and then what are you going to do?
And
Go
then
ahead.
you got a huge cliff. Not only do you have whatever you have to get just to make things continue to work, but then if it doesn't go, you're in a world of hurt.
Right?
It's a difficult question to answer too when a community member says, "So what happens after 6 years?" And you say, we are answering, well, we're optimistic that the state will, fix their funding formula so that we may not have to go back out. But if they don't, I mean, like, we don't know.
Right. Right.
And,
Yeah.
and in some states, which is what you wonder what's happening, some states, this is normal practice. Arizona, I know used to have to go back every so often. So,
And Colorado's like that too.
yeah. So then what kind of resources are we putting into just all of that, right? And the
Yeah.
uncertainty, and hard to run a business when that happens.
Yeah.
Which also brings up the point too that, we, and Menasha doesn't do a great job of it. We're trying to get better, but communicating with your residents. Like you should have some kind of newsletter or something that goes out, at least once a year so residents understand what their tax dollars are going for and, show off good things so that when you do need money, you're not just communicating with them every time you need money because no one likes that.
I think those communication methods, I mean, you do those, right? But there's so many push messages going to everybody these days. Another thing that I've heard that I think makes some sense is having a core group of people that you know spend time with and have them be the ambassadors into the community so that you have more of a people that have more of the story rather than just reading a short newspaper or looking at the headline.
I agree. I think it's important to do post-referendum communication, um, whether you win or lose. If you win, some expression of gratitude, I think goes a long way, as opposed to, haha, we won, give us the money. See you in a few years, so we need money again. Um, and then also, kind of confirming for people that they made the right decision to support the school district. Examples of this is what we're able to do now, or these are the things that we're avoiding, whatever. Just kind of reinforce that it was a good move, good government, and it was a smart decision to support the referendum. And then when you lose, that's really challenging. We've all been through that where, defeat just really kills the momentum. No one wants to be on the committee anymore. Um, um, but you gotta pull it together and do it and be positive. It's a lot of hard work. Sometimes you can see that the districts that had a statement ready if their issue failed because it's just really professional and sounds well done. And sometimes it sounds like they caught an angry board member that 10 minutes after they learn that they've lost and the communication is kind of edgy, and petulant. And you don't want to do that. So um, I mean, we live in a funding by referendum world right now. So you got to get good at this. This is the coin of the realm.
And then obviously an obvious one too, if you did lose and you said that you were going to do X, Y, Z, you need to do those X, Y, Z. So if you're going to say that you were going to, move to do a consolidation study, I hope the board already voted on, moving to doing a consolidation study so that the, community understands that you are serious. Because I think a lot of them just think that we have way too much money and we're not managing it well when that's not the case.
Right. Right. You see that more and more. If you don't pass this, we're going to move towards consolidation or dissolution. Which gives me a chance to plug the spring conference is coming up. All of WASPO World, the spring conference is the original WASPO conference. We do a lot of great conferences, but we really love it when everyone turns out for spring because we won't see everybody again until like 5 months later, like when we get into fall. So um, at spring, one of the breakout sessions is our own Bob Soldner, who's in Madison. Bob was previously at DPI, and he was the DPI go-to person on consolidations and referendums. And Bob did a podcast not long ago that I thought was excellent in explaining the statutory basis for these things. You know, it's not actually up to the local school district to dissolve, right? There's Boundary Appeals Board, DPI has something to say about it. Anyway, I don't know if we can post that a link to that podcast in the chat. We'll do it. Otherwise, we'll just put the link on our website. But if you've got 45 minutes and you want to learn more than just anecdotal stuff about consolidation and how that differs from dissolution and what that means for taxpayers, check out that link. So if Ann Chapman is on, she'll post it. Otherwise, we'll have to post it on our website.
I
Okay.
didn't know if you were spilling some late breaking news that Madison was consolidating with someone.
Yes. Madison's going to consolidate with Middleton because it's the only district that's more liberal than Madison. They're the only two that can do it. Okay, Brian, you brought up some interesting details around ESEA. You want to regale us?
Yeah, so it came up in our regional meeting that the DPI released allocations. I don't always run and look at DPI's emails right away. So I saw this one, but it didn't process it. And in our regional, they were, some districts were saying, 5 to 8% decreases they were seeing. I think some maybe have been more. This is just one thing that, when it was released, it looked like a pretty small decrease, but obviously it affects all the districts differently. Nash is going to see about a 3% decrease in their overall funding. And again, I think we've talked about it in the past too. The whole ESCA funding formula is all kind of messed up, and the federal government knows that it's messed up, but they refuse to fix it because it's not really done. It's based on census data, which doesn't really reflect. I mean, it reflects our population, but it doesn't align to free and reduced, which is a totally different number.
Right. I often wondered about that when you have those like CEP schools, you're not even counting. It's kind of a blanket, designation. Well, I did a little AI aided search here and pulled up a few of the key numbers. I think you're talking about the second bullet there, March, April DPI issues preliminary estimates. I mean, I think the danger here is if you just let's say that you've got 3 FTE attached to your title funds, then what if the title funds go down? They can't support those 3 FTE anymore. You gotta have a plan for that, right? When those dollars you have to get picked up by your general fund, you better be ready for it. So, and by the time you do find out the final number, June, July, a little late to be making those kind of staffing and budgetary allocation decisions, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Wisconsin's going to get a smaller share of the overall, like Title One, for example. What is it, like 20 billion nationwide? We're going to get instead of like almost 12, we're going to get just a little over 11. So that's not good. And then we know the feds are not exactly pouring money into the title programs, so that's not good. And then the third variable is, what's your local share, right? And that's a whole other thing. So yeah, so make sure that you and whoever handles title money in your district is on this. Oh, there's the number. That's Wisconsin's share is going to drop. And I think that's just our poverty relative to others.
We
So
do still see news stories and floating block grants and all that, and that, in my opinion, it creates a whole other complexity, and it's who controls that block grant money, and because a lot of the block grants are kind of open to being spent, however,
yeah.
on education. So
I was always kind of lazy about these when I was budgeting. I was like, oh, I'm just going to assume the same for next year, and because I'm not going to find out until too late anyway. But I think those days are kind of gone. I think you have to really scrutinize these. I mean, your margins are so thin, right? Especially smaller districts. $10,000 surprise is a big deal.
But
Um,
Bob is still trying to dig out of the hole that you created, Mike.
That's probably true. That's probably true. Oh, well, gives you something to do. Okay, well, speaking of, let's talk about purchasing cutoff. If I remember from, you mentioned Beth Sheridan, who's an excellent business manager in Oconomowoc. I think Beth was usually arguing that we should do the spending cutoff around November. I was like, Beth, we actually do have to run a school district. Teachers actually do need this stuff. There's other considerations at play here. But yeah, we were a little early on that, maybe in some years. Um, so Brian, you had mentioned this might be an interesting topic just to sort of get it out there. What are your thoughts?
It seems like it comes up every now and then that people are just, you know, wondering what other people do. And, like we do use April 15th tax day because we feel like everyone knows when taxes are due. It's easy to kind of have it on the same day. And then it's also gives us enough time to get the POs out the door and the product back into the district and be used. Because that's something important for your auditors, that if you wait till, June 20th to order something and it arrives on June 30th and you didn't use it, probably going to be pushed into the next year. I mean, those are the things that the auditors are really going to look for, a lot of those June purchases too, if you're actually using them.
I remember from my accounting days as an undergrad, it had to be ordered, received, and put in use is the technical accounting, rule around the cutoff, right? So if you ordered it and received it, but it's all sitting on the dock, and the auditor walks by and says, "What's all that?" They're going to probably say, "No, we're gonna push it into the next year," right?
And I'm not, I- there is a catch, and I know we all know this, but I just want to verbalize it that I understand that there's the end of the year parties and all that other stuff. Like there's spending that happens right towards the end of the year. We're
Yeah.
not saying no, you can't do that. We're just saying like the bigger things that should have been purchased throughout the year, like this is your last opportunity for those. There are going to be things that pop up, field trips or whatever, at the end of the year. I think Andy and I both agree, like we're not saying no, you can't do it. Like everything's turned off on April 15th. That's just not the case.
Yeah. No, I think Beth was actually cutting off all parties, part of the issue. Um, right. And then there's emergencies. I mean, your building services team, of course, right? They're going to be spending right up to the end of June. Um, but I mean, yeah, think about it. If it's going to be charged to the 25-26 school year, and if it's budgeted for and you want to charge it to 25-26 school year, it only makes sense that it was ordered, received, and put in service. So
I agree with Beth that we don't give our auditors a tour.
no, you do not.
We kind of shut the closet door and say there's nothing behind there.
We used to put up signs saying, hallway being waxed.
What are all those pallets? I don't know. It's all wax. Don't worry.
Waxed, except for this one. Oh, that's it. But I also found some auditors were more diligent about this than others. So it's interesting when they're doing field work, they have a conversation with them around what their parameters are.
Well, that's just it too, though. The auditors aren't in the buildings very often anymore, right?
Oh, that's true.
So,
And maybe that's a good thing. Um, if you do have to accrue and then post into the new year, it's hard to communicate with the department heads. It's like they're like, well, wait, that was supposed to come out of last year's budget. Now my new budget's already compromised, and that gets kind of ugly. So yeah, that's why we push hard to get it done. All kidding aside, anything else on this?
I'll just mention, and it's probably an entire show, but I just will
I
mention
know.
that we take a little different approach, and it took me a few years to get it in place in Oregon. But we do this thing called carryover budgets, and
Yeah.
all this stuff goes away when you do
Right.
that. So, but we'll save that for another show.
Yeah,
I,
can I feel like we should put a plug for your ethics class in here?
I think we may have to turn off the chat at this point because I think we're getting some angry, we got some angry viewers out there. Um, um, I would love to do a session on carrying over of departmental budgets. I did that as well. It's not literally carried over. It falls to fund balance, and then obviously you just reverse out.
Yep.
Um,
But the key is you got to tell your board, hey, we just passed the deficit budget, and because that's the only way you get to spend the
right,
money on fund balance.
right,
So there's a whole education component. Don't, if you're just starting this business, don't just jump there.
right. Okay. Well, I would say that April 15th, May 1st is pretty common around the school districts. And I also think the speed of purchasing is much different than it used to be. So maybe you can get away with a slightly later date than the November date that Beth was using in Oconomowoc. Okay.
And you can always use your auditor for the reason too. I mean, people understand that. I mean, I mean, we have our process, but the auditor is the one that, is going to smack us on our hand.
Yeah. Well, earlier this year, DPI was the subject of a legislative audit bureau report. It was kind of aimed at, how good is DPI doing in supervising and managing school district, reporting behaviors and so on. And one of the criticisms was that the audit reports were not all coming in on time. And if you peel that back, one of the problems was that these inputs that you need to make the audit happen, I mean, beyond balancing cash, right? And it was pointed out that if you don't have like your actuarial report ordered and and lined up in time, that could potentially delay the audit, right? So, and the same is true on asset valuation, physical inventory stuff. So, these are key things. You guys all know this, but I just thought it might be some folks who are relatively new who are watching. These are key ingredients to the audit process that you can and should be dealing with in March, April, May. So you don't find yourself waiting and waiting and waiting to get these inputs into your audit. You guys have specs for these services?
Yeah, I never understood why actuarial reports took like 300 months to do.
I,
They say like, it's not 300 months, but it's, they say what, like 18 to 24 weeks or something. I'm like, what?
yeah, yeah. That's my point. Yes, thank you. Why is that so long?
Like we used you last time. Well, no, we need all different, like, really? Like you don't have like cut and paste?
Right.
Like,
Come on. We know
maybe
you.
I'm simplifying the science a little too much, but
I think so. Yeah. Well, maybe they need a new dartboard. Um, um, and then are you still what are you doing on the asset valuation side? You have a third party, and how often does that happen, and how do you do it?
We actually do it ourselves. Assets, fixed assets, the thresholds are significantly higher than they were years and years ago.
Right,
So
right,
it's a little bit easier. There's not that many of them that you actually have to kind of account for. So
right.
that helps. We group things too, so that so it's a little bit easier from our point of view. So we're unusual in that regard, but we can manage it ourselves.
and we do the same thing too. And I echo Andy's comment. I mean, our capital threshold's now $10,000. So, I mean, we're talking probably in one hand, maybe two are the new assets, probably just one hand. Because we don't buy a ton of stuff over $10,000. It's even, food service equipment is not always over $10,000. So it's just very few stuff. And we just keep track of it in our system. And
Good,
uh, in order to get going on that path, we did have a full valuation done by a company, and then we just took their information and loaded it in.
good approach. Okay.
And
So,
Andy's amazing, so I mean, everyone should really be copying what Andy does.
right. Have you noticed how many times Andy says we're a little unusual in that we fill in the blank? That's why you're on here, Andy. Well, guys, this has been fun. Any closing comments? Anything going on? Weekend plans?
But it's
Uh,
warm.
All right.
not,
You
not
know,
so,
I used to never feel sorry for athletic directors. In fact, I basically always hated them. But I will give them a little bit of sympathy if they're trying to schedule like, the all the field sports this time of year because it's just freeze out, rain out, whatever, reschedule, and it's just a lot of work. So,
bus drivers too.
ah,
Just trying to figure out how to make that all work. Officials,
right.
bus drivers, all those things, right?
Yeah, it's total chaos. So we will be back on Friday, May 29th. Have a great weekend and please get yourself signed up. We've got a really big crowd coming to spring conference. Make sure you're there because we put a lot of effort into the programming for that conference in particular. So get yourself signed up for spring and we'll see you there. Okay, I think we're done. Have a great weekend, everybody.